Lean in. A little closer. The fire is dying. And the ice is listening. You think winter is just cold weather. You think it's snow on the Needles and dark ice on the bay. You're wrong. In the high north, winter is a weight, an empty space waiting to fill itself. It breathes when you breathe. Have you ever heard the Boreal forest go completely dead? Not quiet. Dead. No jays. No squirrels. Just a suffocating silence settling over the trees like an ash shroud. That is when the air changes. The air turns dry enough to freeze the moisture on your eyes. It smells of frozen hemlock needles, wet wolf fur, and the bitter, iron tang of dropping barometric pressure right before a blizzard. If you walk out into those woods, look down, you'll see your breath blooming in white plumes in front of your face. But if you meet a man whose breath doesn't steam, you don't ask him his name. You run.
The year was 1782. Real events recorded in the Hudson Bay Company post journals. Down south, men fought a war over flags. But up at James Bay, at a stone and timber outpost called Fort Albany, the world shrank to a single room and a dying pile of birch. French warships had burned the northern depots. Fort Albany survived, but it was marooned, severed from supply lines. Chief Factor Edward Jarvis sat in his quarters, listening to the ice lock the river shut. With him was Surgeon Robert Goodwin. They had grain in the vaults. They had salted meat. They weren't starving.
Not yet. In late March, out of a 3-day blizzard, the gates of Fort Albany groaned. A man walked in out of the whiteout. He wore the rags of a French-Canadian trapper. No snowshoes, no rifle. He marched straight out of the drift, his boots sinking unnaturally deep into the frozen snowpack. His name was Jean-Baptiste Marceau. They dragged him to the hearth, set him near the iron stove, offered him hot rum and wool. Marceau didn't speak. He didn't shiver. His fingertips were blackened and frostbitten, petrified hard as flint, clicking together like dry river stones as his hands twitched in his lap. Goodwin, the surgeon, pulled off the trapper's wet scarf. That's when the room went ice cold. Marceau's mouth was open. His lips were gone, chewed to the gums by his own teeth in the dark of the storm. And yet, sitting 3 feet from a red-hot stove, the air coming from his open mouth produced no steam, not a cloud. His chest rose, but his breath was as cold as the bottom of a frozen lake. They searched his leather pack. Inside were human bones, blackened, split open for the marrow. Historians call it survival. They use medical words, anthropophagy, delirium. But Marceau hadn't run out of food. He had trapped in a valley rich with cached provisions. He didn't eat human flesh because his stomach was empty. Something else was hungry inside him. Deep in his pack, Goodwin found a tarnished silver locket. Marceau had dug it out of an unmarked grave upriver. A little trinket stolen from the dirt. The Cree elders know what that locket brought with it. They call it the Witiko. It doesn't start in the belly. It starts in the mind. A cold draft that creeps into the soul until your brother doesn't look like a man anymore. He looks like game. The air around the infected changes, filling the room with the sharp stench of wet wolf fur, frozen needles, and ancient decay.
The Cree hunters trading at Albany watched from the courtyard. They knew the old taboo. You never speak of this entity in summer. You speak of it only in the dead of winter, with respect and with terror. They told Jarvis the truth. Marceau was calcifying. When the spirit takes you, the heart turns to solid ice. The bones grow dense as iron. That was why his tracks sheared through 6 feet of hard winter crust down to the soil, while healthy men glided on snowshoes. His weight was multiplying, his frame becoming a vessel for an insatiable ice giant that grows larger with every kill, but never feels full. Jarvis and Goodwin tried to save him.
They forced hot bear fat down his throat, melted tallow, steaming sturgeon oil, the old remedy to melt the core. Marceau vomited up solid chunks of clear ice onto the floorboards. Chunks of ice from a living stomach. That night, the temperature inside the blockhouse dropped 40 degrees. Water buckets froze solid next to the hearth. Marceau broke his iron chains. Not with a tool, with his bare, petrified fingers. When they found him in the yard, he was standing over the dog pen. The total silence of the forest had come inside the walls. No barking, just stone-like knuckles clicking together in the dark. The pine timber above his head groaned under the sub-zero wind, and the cold sting of blood mixed with the bitter gale. Lead bounces off a heart of ice. It took 4 men with iron bars and birchwood torches to bring him down. And when he lay still in the red snow, the Cree elders warned them, "You cannot bury a Witiko. The frozen earth keeps the spirit alive." They built a pyre of dry birch 10 feet high. They cut Marceau open. Goodwin wrote it in the post ledger. When the ribs were parted, there was no blood in the chest cavity, only a block of gray ice where the heart should have been. They threw the ice into the fire. For 3 days, as the bones burned, an unnatural stream of freezing water bled from the calcified marrow, constantly drowning the flames. The men cut wood until their hands bled, just to keep the fire hot enough to burn him to ash. Jean-Baptiste Marceau was reduced to ash in April of 1782. His name was quietly filed away under anxieties brought on by winter isolation. But the ice doesn't die just because you burn one man. It sits past the tree line, in the dark timber where the sun never hits the forest floor. Sometimes it comes as a silver locket in the dirt.
sometimes as a whisper when you've been alone too long, telling you that your companions aren't human anymore, that they're just fuel for your own survival. That's the real infection, not the starvation of the body, the starvation of the soul. Watch the hearth tonight.
If the fire goes blue, if the wood stops crackling, and if your breath stops steaming when you speak, don't look at the window, because something out there is looking back at you.